Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show. Position groups, tight ends. 9 of them. How many? What's it called? 19 personnel.
19 personnel. Get them all out there.
50 minutes on the tight end discussion because there's more tight ends than there are any other position at Ohio State. Apparently, Bill, this is a robust discussion. I assume that we are entering.
I'm fascinated to see what the scores end up being because I think there's sort of like two separate conversations. There's how good the tight ends have actually been and how Ohio State has chosen to utilize them, and the latter I think might inform people's scores in a way that maybe will not be entirely fair to the players themselves. So I'm interested to see where that landed for the people in their scoring.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. You do have to sort of separate the art
and the artist. Yeah.
Oh, well said. Well said. So this is, but usually, yeah. Okay. We're separating the art and the artist. The art of tight end play. Just like how many guys are we talking about? How many actual people are we going to discuss in this position group breakdown?
I guess 5, right? They've played 5 somewhat regularly. Like three like pretty much all the time, and then two other guys like kind of specialize, but I think it makes sense to discuss all 5 of them.
Okay. Max Klare, Will Kacmarek, Bennett Christian, Jelani Thurman, and Nate Roberts, who we did not discuss in the running back discussion, who, although he more often than not lines up at fullback, we still consider a tight end, and Nate Roberts is part of the tight end discussion.
Yes, very much tight end, yeah.
Okay. Do you have the snap counts for those 5 guys?
I do, yeah. Kacmarek has the most at 476. Klare is right behind him at 438. Bennett Christian has played 252. Nate Roberts has played 160, and Jelani Thurman has played 135.
Okay. Do you have an idea of why this has become a thing this season? That we have never been knee deep in 13 and 14 personnel discussions really ever before in the Ryan Day era. And now it has become one of the more frequent topics that we have discussed and that fans have discussed.
Well, they've never really had this many who can play, because I would say that all these guys can play, right? Like I think I know Nate Roberts is a freshman, but I think you can look at that room and like get excited about the fact that wait, we have 5 tight ends that can play. Let's find ways to use that, because some years, like they had 2, right, when they had Luke Farrell and Jeremy Ruckert, and some years they kind of had 1. Like, so I understand looking at the room as it was constructed coming into the season and wanting to utilize it a little differently. Plus, you only had like 2 established receivers coming back, so you can talk yourself into playing 12 personnel more, and then that's a gateway drug to 13 and 14, I guess. I don't like it's. Yeah. You see it happening in the NFL. I noticed a lot of discussion this week about like how the Rams are utilizing 13 personnel. I think they're playing it more than anybody in the league and doing it really effectively because they're able to be explosive and dangerous throwing it out of those formations, because they have like Terrence Ferguson, who's basically a receiver. And I think like for Ohio State's purposes, that's kind of Max Klare. The thing that's puzzling to me is that is Ohio State plays a lot of 12, a decent amount of 13, and some 14, but like Max Klare is not always out there. And it seems like he's the guy that kind of makes it different. And I guess you could say the same thing about Jelani Thurman, although they just don't really use him that way. So there's like the idea and the execution. I understand the idea. I think the execution behind it, and I mean that mostly from a coaching staff deployment of talent perspective, has been a little lacking.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Before we dive in, just a couple things. One is, like, subscribe, tell a friend about the Bill and Doug Show. If you're listening on a podcast and you want to drop a review or any comments like that or whatever, like, we just love it all. We appreciate it all. Good, bad, whatever you think. We want to know what you're thinking. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to comment something, we love to hear the feedback. Thank you for being here. And we appreciate it. Tell a friend, like, spread the word about the Bill and Doug Show. 2, go see our friends at Roback.com. Like we're getting it. Like it's here. Like, holidays are here. Christmas is practically here. So I don't know what the shipping deal is, but like Roback is a place to visit year round, to shop for attire, to shop for hoodies and polos and quarter zips. RHOBK.com. BAD20 is the code, BAD20. You get 20% off your first order. And the last thing is, I shaved off my beard. If you would like to see the in-between step, we saved the in-between step. It was on our Wednesday show for Substack subscribers. When you sign up and become a Substack subscriber of Bill and Doug at billanddougosu.substack.com, you get to see what I look like just with a mustache. But now it's gone. But like I was going to say, like, mustaches and beards are never gone. They're just on vacation, right? Because they can always come back. Your next mustache is right around the corner. So, this is where I am now. Feels good to be clean and ready for a playoff run. But if you want to see me looking kind of like a creepy weirdo in a mustache, you can go pay $10 a month. Is that OnlyFans? Is that what OnlyFans is?
That is approaching that territory. Yeah.
I got some special mustache pictures for my $10 Substack this week. All right. Can I do something weird besides have a mustache for one show? Can we start with Nate Roberts?
Yeah.
Because I remain intrigued by maybe what they are trying to have Nate Roberts become. And when we were previewing the Ohio State-Michigan game and Max Bredesen, where he was hurt, was he going to play or not, how important Max Bredesen is to that Michigan offense. And it's not only Max Bredesen, we've seen it before. But Michigan certainly, right, in this era of this style of offense, has used sort of that tight end fullback hybrid who can line up at tight end, can line up and block for a running back, can be a true lead blocker, but also you can then throw him the ball and do those kind of things. And I'm wondering if the future of Nate Roberts is just a traditional tight end, and this is just what they had to do now, or if they really want him to become something a little different. That's not what Max Klare is. That's not what Will Kacmarek is. That's not what Cade Stover was. That's not what Luke Farrell and Jeremy Ruckert and any guys like that were. They were never lined up in the backfield and used as a weapon like that. Are they trying something here, or is this just a snapshot out of a moment in time? They didn't kind of have a walk-on fullback, so they made their freshman tight end do that job.
I think it's just a snapshot moment in time.
Okay.
This is not what they view him as. I think he could be their starting inline tight end next year.
Okay.
Because Will Kacmarek has to go. So no, he's not a running back. I don't believe he's ever been a running back. He's not built like a fullback. He's a tight end that they're masquerading as a fullback because he's a true freshman who they wanted to get on the field early.
Okay. Oh, well.
And it's not his fault.
No. Do you know? Do you have the numbers on how often he's lined up as a tight end versus how often he's lined up in the backfield? Because like the one thing about Nate Roberts is we're talking about him here as a tight end. I don't even remember how often he's lined up as an actual tight end. He really is a fullback.
He has been in the backfield 80 times and an inline tight end 61 times.
Okay.
And in the slot 16 times. So he's been in the backfield more than he's been anywhere else.
And I would imagine most of those tight end snaps are probably when they're down to the second and third team offense and blowouts, and he's out there as, okay, I'm also like the backup to Will Kacmarek, or I'm the backup to Max Klare, right? They don't really use him that way when the game's mattering.
Yeah, of his 61 inline snaps, 18 of them came against Grambling.
Okay.
Looks like he played 12 against Rutgers, so most of them in those two games.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else about Nate Roberts?
He played 18 backfield snaps against Michigan. That's not always fullback, because you can be like a whatever offset tight end, whatever kind of thing. But no, my only thing on Nate Roberts is what I've said about him before. Like I think he can and will be a pretty solid tight end here. They're just asking him to do something he's not particularly good at right now. And that, again, that is not his fault. That is on the coaching staff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll let you do the rest of the tight ends in any order you want, because you did all the work on it. I just was really trying to create a new position for Ohio State, and you shot it down, which is right.
No, I mean, I would love to see them go get a fullback or like a traditional blocking H-back kind of guy, which is sort of like what Max Bredesen is at Michigan, but they don't have that on the roster right now. So
Yeah.
we'll see if they choose to add one. I think Will Kacmarek's been good. Like I think he's been exactly what they want him to be, which is the primary inline blocking tight end, and more often than not, he's done that job really well. It is interesting to me. I do feel like there have been some bad tight end games this year, and it does seem to me like when one plays poorly, they sort of all play poorly. So that's like I'm trying to think. The Indiana game was a bad tight end game. Maybe it was the Wisconsin game might have been an especially bad tight end game, but there's also been some like really good tight end games. Like I think the Michigan game was a good tight end game. So they've like as a group have been a little up and down, but like they tend to do so together, which I don't know what that means, and maybe that's not entirely accurate. It's just sort of how it feels. But I do think Kacmarek's been fairly consistent. I think he does his specific job well. I also think if they wanted to involve him more as a pass catcher, they probably could. I think he's shown himself to be reliable in those positions when they've asked him to do that. It's just like not. I guess it's not the thing he does best. It's not really what they brought him here for, but he can do something kind of in the open field in a pinch, I think. So I would give him like pretty high marks for the season, and honestly, probably the same for Max Klare. His receiving production is down from what it was at Purdue, but it was always going to be because he's on a team with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. But I think he has provided a little bit of a punch as the third receiving option. Probably could provide more if the ball were to go his way more. And I think he has simultaneously improved as a blocker while also like over the course of the season, I think they've gotten smarter about how to use him as a blocker. So I would give him, I would think both those two guys are doing their jobs pretty well. And I think are probably like propping up the rest of the position group, frankly.
So both those guys we're talking about are transfers. Max Klare, this is his second year at Ohio State coming from Ohio. No, excuse me. Will Kacmarek, his second year at Ohio State coming from Ohio. Max Klare's first year coming from Purdue. Is it okay if Ohio State lives in the portal looking for tight ends, or is there something that they got to get, or they are getting figured out here that like that's not where they're going to be because now they have Nate Roberts and Bennett Christian and they'll Nick Lauder coming in like they're good to go.
Yeah, I don't think they want to be that necessarily. Like Nate Roberts is a pretty big get, right? In that recruiting class 2025. And they took some decent sized swings in 2026, ended up losing what was his name? Corbin Fordham to Florida State, and then got Nate Lauder late. That's Nate Lauder's just like a local guy. That's kind of like a layup recruitment for Ohio State. But then you look at 2027, they're taking some pretty big swings there too. So I think tight end's like a tricky position where like maybe the plan should be like, let's try to get like one high school guy who we think's a stud and then be open-minded to taking a transfer tube, just because like if you can get an older guy who's kind of been through it, that can help you. You don't have to wait for that, 2.5 year process to get the dividend down the line, just because it is such a developmental position. So I could see them taking tight ends maybe at a higher frequency than some other positions in the portal, but I don't think they want to be relying on the portal for any one position.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But also, like I don't know. Do you think maybe you have a better chance of going to find like a MAC tight end who can help Ohio State than you would finding maybe guys at other positions that just is maybe a little bit of a developmental spot? And if it's a guy who maybe came in and was slightly lower rated and didn't have an Ohio State offer out of high school, but after like two or three seasons of putting on some weight and playing MAC ball, it's like, oh yeah, no, that guy can play at Ohio State.
Yeah, and I think the position sort of lends itself to that too, because you can get like, I don't know, guys who go to the G6 level thinking they might be a receiver who grow into a tight end, or an offensive lineman who doesn't quite develop that way, who ends up like staying at tight end. Like you can arrive at this position from a few different places in a way that I think is unlike most other positions in football. So I think that probably lends itself to there being sort of more like diamonds in the rough at the lower level that you could find if you're looking for them.
And I feel like we end up referencing this like a gazillion times, and I'm not sure why. But again, Luke Farrell and Jeremy Rucker, that pairing, when you had sort of an inline blocking guy and more of a stand-up slot receiving guy, and you see Will Kacmarek and Max Klare kind of filling roles like that this year. Is that how they're just always going to think about this? That really there's one starting tight end spot, but it's actually kind of two different positions, and they want two different kind of skill sets. And the inline guy who can block and be well rounded is probably the starter, but the guy who can stand up and be a little bit more of a slot receiver actually is probably going to get the ball in his hands more.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that's how you repeat something that Ryan Day has said. Like, you don't want to be like playing in 12 personnel with like two similar tight ends, right? You want your tight ends to be balanced and be able to do a mix of everything reasonably well. But if one specializes more in inline blocking and one specializes more in being like a route runner, receiver, after the catch kind of guy, I would assume that's where they want to be. And I think probably between the Ruckert and Farrell years and probably this year, they probably had a little too much like route running and maybe not quite enough blocking.
Okay. But then there were also a couple years. Didn't it feel like for a little bit of a stretch there, like they couldn't get into 12? They didn't really have two guys to trust. Was that maybe like
years ago? Kate Stover was the number one tight end in 22 and 23, but I don't think they were getting into 12 all that much.
Yeah,
those years they were deeper at receiver probably, but
but they want Ryan Day wants the ability to play two tight ends as a form of attacking a defense. He wants that ability, and as much as it's been like, oh my gosh, there's so many tight ends on the field. They have that this year. They can use that as a strength to the point that maybe they've overused it.
Yeah, I'm just looking back through. So 2021. Which was Ruckert was back, but Farrell was gone. In 21, Ruckert played 714 snaps, and Kate Stover played 223. So that's a pretty big gap. 22, Stover played 709. Mitch Rossi played 285, but that was like a kind of a backfield role. And G. Scott played 141. Yeah, so not a lot of 12 going on there. And then in 23. Stover played 615 and G played 353. So they were, I think, getting a little bit more into 12.
Okay.
23. Last year, G played 548. Kacmarek only played 298, but he got hurt and missed like half the season.
Oh, right.
Okay. So I don't know. I think they probably would have played a decent amount of 12 personnel last year because G. Scott was kind of like that move around tight end.
Yep.
And Kacmarek could have been the blocker, but it just turned out that like G. Scott, I think, had to be like their 11 personnel tight end for longer than they probably would have preferred.
Yeah. And you have said, I can't remember what show you said it on, but you think their best personnel grouping is 12 personnel, is when they have Kacmarek and Klare out there with only Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith.
I think so. Because it gives you, it makes you bigger to run the ball. And then I think it puts the defense in a bind because they can choose to match their personnel, right? Take the nickel off the field, put a linebacker on the field, but then you have one fewer defensive back to deal with Carnell and Jeremiah, or you don't match personnel, leave that nickel on the field, and like that guy who's small might have to cover or Max Klare, or then you can run at them, right? So I think that's the mix that Ohio State would prefer. And it is kind of like contingent on having a tight end like Klare to do it. But I think, yeah, that's what they opened the Big Ten championship game with, those four guys and Bo Jackson. Just that, as we discussed on our Monday sound off show, the grouping of Smith, Tate, Kacmarek, Klare, and Jackson played together 8 times in that game. And then that foursome of Smith, Tate, Kacmarek, and Klare, like regardless of who the running back was, only played together 12 times in that game.
Okay. So the room is actually, so then the room is in pretty good shape. It sounds like it's just like you said, it's more about, they feel they're in such good shape, are they overusing it? But Kacmarek and Klare as the frontline guys are kind of what Ohio State wants.
Yeah. And I think Jelani Thurman has been good in like a very like sort of streamlined role. The only one I would say that like really hasn't played well is Bennett Christian. I think like and part of that for me could be the fact that I had like really high expectations for him as a blocker, really since he got here, because he was a little bit different coming out of high school in that he was primarily a blocking tight end in high school. A lot of the guys that Ohio State brings in out of high school are just like their team's best receiver who are projected to play tight end when they get to college. That's what Jelani Thurman was. but Christian wasn't that. Christian played like in a run heavy offense and blocked a lot. But I would say that like that's not really been a strength of his while playing for Ohio State. So that's like the only spot in the room that I would say is like kind of a I don't know, not matching expectations, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think? Who are the starting tight ends next year? Would you guess?
I think Klare is going to come back. So I would say the starting tight ends are sophomore Nate Roberts and Max Klare.
And how do you think you'll feel about that?
I think okay.
Yeah.
You know, another year for Nate Roberts to get stronger will help because he's going to have to be that inline blocking tight end. I guess I could see them adding a transfer. I think I'd just be surprised. If Klare leaves, they almost have to. But if he decides to not go to the NFL, I think maybe they won't add a transfer. So then the room could in theory just be the remaining four guys who play the most: Klare, Christian, Roberts, Thurman, and maybe one of the younger guys in the room, whether that's Max LeBlanc or Brody Lennon, like stepping up into like that fifth role. Should Ohio State feel like it needs to go that deep? I don't think that we play a bunch of 14 personnel next year. So I don't have it on my radar as a spot for them to add a transfer unless Klare goes to the NFL.
Okay. And again, just like if people, for Nate Roberts, 24/7 Sports Composite and the class of 2025, number 203 national player, number 10 tight end from the state of Oklahoma. And you already said this, Bill, he was a big get. And so like the idea that, we certainly could be in a spot where you look up in a couple of years and Nate Roberts has been a 3-year starter for Ohio State, that he had a very specific role as a freshman and then was their starting tight end when he was a sophomore, junior, and senior, right?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at, so Kacmarek 6'6", 258 on Ohio State's roster. Roberts is 6'5", 240. Like that's good size for a freshman tight end. I would imagine like by the time camp rolls around next year, Nate Roberts might be more like 250. Okay. He's a pretty well put together kid, and like that, whatever people think of like using this as a guy, like the coaching staff loves him. Like it was evident from the moment he showed up on campus. Like they think this is a real dude who like on the field can have an impact, but I also think like has some leadership qualities to him too, and can be like a bit of a tone setter for the program. That's why he's been kind of the only tight end to ever break through as a true freshman that I can remember covering the team. So they have really high expectations for him. And I think that'll probably start next fall.
I don't think we're going to do this show, but if we were doing outrageous predictions for Ohio State in the playoff, one of mine would be Jelani Thurman catches a touchdown. And Jelani Thurman has 1 touchdown this year against Grambling. They were throwing him a pass on 4th and 1 against Michigan before they had a false start, and that play got wiped out. But Jelani Thurman, man, like where we were when he was a true freshman, right? That was right when they were coming off playing Georgia in the semifinal, and Georgia had Brock Bowers and what was the guy's name?
Darnell Washington,
right? I was thinking Amari Washington. That's the Oregon defensive tackle. Darnell Washington. It was just like, oh man, like you could see what they were doing with Darnell Washington as like a big physical guy who could catch. And like Jelani Thurman came in here. It was like, holy moly. And just like, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know, but he has a minor role on this team. But man, I thought that guy was going to be a guy who was going to pop in a big way. And like, it just hasn't happened yet.
I really don't know why he doesn't play more. And I don't really know that you get an honest answer, but I like, again, PFF grades, just a guide. He's their highest rated guy. He's their highest graded guy on 135 snaps. And I think like prior to this year, they've definitely turned to him as a receiver at times when it's not looked great. Like last year he was targeted 9 times and only had 4 catches. This year he's been targeted 8 times and has 7 catches and a touchdown. So I don't know. I'm always going to be sort of infatuated with him until there's reason not to be. But Yeah, I could definitely see him having a larger role next year too. But I've also thought that about him the last 2 years, and it hasn't really materialized. Like he plays some, but he's very much the fifth guy in the room.
And I thought maybe it's like, okay, well, if they just think of him as a pass catching tight end or whatever, but then he's in on the goal line package. They have him in as a blocking tight end when they go to this big, heavy personnel. Like, as you said, when they're in 14 and they have 4 tight ends on the field and they have Nate Roberts in the backfield, they usually have Klare off the field and they have Kacmarek, Bennett Christian, and Jelani Thurman are the guys in there to block and road grade. And there was like maybe a game or two, I think, where maybe Thurman wasn't in there or they were putting in Justin Terry as like an offensive lineman playing an extra tight end spot, but then they got back to Jelani in that role. So if it was like, okay, well, like Jelani's not blocking to the level where they feel like a tight end needs to be on the field, I don't think he'd be in there in the goal line package. So I don't know, but he is. So who knows? Best of luck to Jelani Thurman, however it shakes out. Grades. We do position grades. We ask our Substack subscribers to rate every position group from 1 to 100. Do you want to guess what the average was for this group?
66.
75.
Okay, good.
So,
I was thinking it should be higher. Yeah, okay.
They did separate the art from the artist, right? Because when we did that show, and one of the main shows we do for Substack subscribers is like send in your questions and comments, and we break stuff down after a game, and Bill gets in the film machine and does all this stuff. And that was, we're talking about like, why are they using 13 and 14 personnel so much? And I think, were frustrated in your analysis, and people were like, holy moly, once you offered that analysis. And I think there was a lot of frustration from the fans, but they're not holding against these guys. So your 66 is based on like tight ends. I don't want to talk about tight ends.
Yeah. So, but I'm glad they weren't. I'm at a 79, so like I'm kind of with them.
Oh, well, this makes the averaging easy. I'm at a 77. So, all right. So the average is 77. So, better than that 3-year run. And thank you for looking that up. But that 3-year run where it was like, well, they can't do the thing. They want to do something. They want to play 12 and they can't. That wasn't great. Like, we literally don't have the roster at the point that we want it to be or need it to be to deploy our offense how we ideally would want to do it. And that's solved. So congrats to the room. Congrats to the roster construction. It's just like now at the point, they got to the point where they love it so much they can't help themselves.
Just got a little too excited. Yeah. I don't think they're going to do that in the postseason. I truly don't. They'll play 12 for sure. I'm not saying you'll see the end of 13 personnel. I looked this up. It might be like slightly off, but I think these percentages are roughly correct. 45% 11 personnel with 1 tight end, 41% 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, 10% 13 personnel with 3 tight ends. They actually play 13 personnel about as much as anybody in the country.
Really?
They have the second. Is this right? No, sorry. And 14 personnel, they have the second most rushing attempts in the country. I'm not able to look at it like holistically, but I just looked at like how many times are you running it out of certain personnel packages. So they have the second most runs out of 14 personnel, and they have the 4th most runs out of 13 personnel.
Okay.
So like they are outliers in how much they get into these big tight end packages.
But you think, you've discussed this, I think, that our belief, especially with Brian Hartline taking a head coaching job, but we thought it anyway, that Ryan Day would just have his hands more directly on the play calling and the game planning in the postseason. You think that's part of the reason they'll get a little bit out of so much 13 and 14 personnel, but also the way Ryan Day talked about it, they thought like they had a matchup thing against Indiana, right? And it didn't really work, but that was not just like an idea. It was maybe a specific kind of matchup thing that maybe won't exist in the playoff.
Yes, I think that is right.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think. They scored 1 red zone touchdown, right, in each of the last 2 games. 1 against Indiana, 1 against Michigan. Is that right?
Sounds right.
I think that's right. The one against Michigan, they were in 11, I believe, and the one against Indiana, they were in 12.
Okay.
And they were both low red zone throws.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I'm not saying they're going to scrap 13 entirely because I just don't want to get yelled at if they come out in 13 at any point against whoever they play in the Cotton Bowl. But I think they will be. Honestly, if I had to guess, maybe their most used personnel grouping in the playoff is 12 personnel. Would be my guess.
Yeah. Okay. All right. we appreciate you guys letting us hang and talk ball. We're almost done with these position group breakdowns. We obviously recorded these ahead a little bit because we had some stuff going on this weekend. But nothing changed. But we're in the thick of the college football playoff right now. The plan is that we will be speaking with some Ohio State players and coaches starting on Monday. So we're excited for that. Both Bill and I will be in Dallas for the Cotton Bowl. We're excited for that. We'll be here through the entire playoff run. So if you want to come hang with us on Substack, Bill and Doug OSU.substack.com. If you just want to stay here on your podcast feed, on your YouTube feed, and hang out here, we're just grateful that you're giving us a chance to talk some ball and that we get to follow the Ohio State Buckeyes as they try to become the first repeat champs in Ohio State history. So for now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the Bill and Doug Show.